Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Gloves Off. We have a very, very interesting program today. I'm going to slaughter his name, but this is the second time he's been on. Thanks for coming on twice. Robert Ruano and Tony Garcia, and we are going to be talking about the Everglades and the urban boundary district and the extension of the 836 expressway that is probably or will probably eventually destroy some of our Everglades, which us three being environmentalists, we don't want to see. I have to read the disclaimer, but if anybody wants to call in live, you can call in at 786-584-7665, or you can send an email, and we'll be happy to answer any and all questions. The opinions of the host, guests, and callers are not necessarily the opinions of the community newspapers. So anyway, you guys want to give a little bit of your backgrounds?
Sure.
Robert, you're up to bat.
All right. First, thank you for having me on again and talking about this very timely and important project. So Robert Ruano, I'm the president and founder of Ecostrata Services. We do grants and government consulting, but I'm also, I guess, as you said, labeled me an environmental advocate. I do get involved. I'm on environmental boards and really care about protecting our environment. It's a very fragile environment that we have here. And so I'm just a concerned citizen. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here also. I'm Tony Garcia. I'm an architect. I'm based here in Miami, and the majority of my practice is actually transportation planning. So I get to see nationally and internationally what's going on, and then also compare that to what we've got going on here. And was for a good part of my early career an environmentalist, like you would say, but I'm less involved these days. But this is definitely a subject that keeps on coming back over and over. And I think the fact that we've got a lot of people that come out of the woodwork that are very passionate against this project tells you a lot about the merits of the project and its long-term success, hopefully.
So let's get into a little bit of history about Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade County, and we had a 2-minute conversation before the show started, a lot of prep time, has always been behind the curve when it comes to mass transit. It's always thought, let's use cars to solve the transportation issue in Miami-Dade. And that really has a huge impact on not only the environment in Dade County, but I would assume the environment all over the United States. I would assume that the residents in Dade County are a little bit more conscious about the environment due to the location of where we are, being on a peninsula, being by the ocean, being the river of grass, which is the Everglades, as it was coined years ago. We're really surrounded by a lot of the environment that we don't want to see destroyed. Most of the people I talk to, it seems like the politicians historically have not felt the same way. What they're more interested in is tax revenue, more development, and not taking the cars off the street and doing some mass transit. You guys concur with that?
That's a big one. Go ahead. You take that one first.
Yeah.
I would say, I don't know that it's all in that politicians are the only ones that are responsible for that. There's a broader cultural conversation related to that I think exists here as it does in the rest of the United States. But there are plenty of cities in the United States that have this history of autocentric planning. That's a matter of fact across the United States, right? But in the 90s and mid 2000s, you see a lot of cities start to make investments in bond measures, in things like our PTP, that were meant to kickstart and fill some of the gap of the capital projects, building out new lines, actually increasing the amount of service and also density of transit stops. LA did that. You can't find another more autocentric place than LA. That was how it was created. But they made investments. They passed a bond after ours, and they're already getting significant. They're finishing their second and third phase of new projects, while we are still, I don't know where we're at. We rebranded it, and now it's, we're going to be doing some buses on the road. I don't know, but certainly it's not a question of money or political will. If there is that political will, you can actually make the change happen.
So I say to you that anybody who doesn't believe that adding more cars onto and more expressways into a county or a city or anything else is really hampering, trying to save the environment. What we should be doing, and we've never done, or actually it hasn't been done, in my opinion, since Alex Pinellas was mayor of Dade County, is focus on mass transit. I mean, we're lacking. I was born and raised here. We're so behind the ball on mass transit to get the cars off the road, because cars hurt the environment. Can we agree on that?
Yes, we can.
Cars are destruction of the environment. And I understand whether we switch to electric cars or it's gas cars, it still is impeding. It's hurting the environment, and we need to really focus on mass transit. And it just hasn't. Every time they even focus on mass transit, they try to cheapen their way out.
Yes, or the politics get in play, lobbyists get involved, and things change. And when you're supposed to spend a lot of money on a project, and it gets stalled, and that's what happens here a lot. Projects are on the drawing boards and they get stalled, or as Tony said about the smart plan, they rebrand a project. There's a lot of options out there, as Tony's saying, and there's places that have really made an impact. We're stopped here in Miami-Dade, and talking about Alex Pinellas and what they did. And I was having a conversation with somebody about that today. That was a half-penny.
Correct.
Site, right? It was doomed from the start. Okay.
Because
it was a half penny.
It was grossly misused.
And if you think about the politics, and I remember back then it was supposed to be a penny, and then the politics got into play and they reduced it to a half penny. Now, a penny, hopefully, if they let's hope that they wouldn't have used more money for operations if they had a whole penny. But that was part of the problem. They said, okay, this is what we need, and the politics got into play and they cut it in half. So it was kind of doomed really before it really started.
Yeah, but I don't even think they used the half penny on anything except for operations. And that wasn't what it was earmarked for.
No, not at all.
It was earmarked to expand the metro rail as it is today, because I voted for it. So,
right.
So I know.
So did I.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So where is the metro rail? Why haven't we gotten? We have talks about expansion of the Metro Mover, which is a dead technology. I'm not sure why anybody keeps talking about that. Light rail, streetcars, the bus, express the bus lanes. I think it's clear. You read even on the comments on a lot of these articles and on blogs, people want metro rail. It's a simple thing to expand, and it's expensive, but bringing it back to the expressway, we tend to find money for the things that are a priority, right? It doesn't seem to be a factor of money, because we spend $1 billion on an interchange that maybe doesn't really impact people's travel time, because by the time it's all said and done, all those cars have come and filled in the extra space that you just spent $1 billion on.
No, that's what you're doing, is you're just putting more cars on a road.
So, which is the same problem with this expressway. If you're not investing in transit, then adding more lanes doesn't actually do anything. It only makes traffic worse.
Okay, so what do you say? What do you say to the people that? Okay, so you're against. First of all, why don't you explain to them what in case nobody?
Sure, the Kendall Parkway.
Yeah, the Parkway.
Well, if Tommy, can you show that first one? I mean, it doesn't. It's not very clear, but at least you see the colors and you understand. And we'll talk about it. That's the proposed. The county has something called the Comprehensive Development Master Plan, which are basically the policies in terms of how the county is developed. The colors, they mean different things, but if you look towards the left, you'll see the Kendall Parkway stretching down there from blue. It was, by the way, Kendall Parkway is the nice name for it. Originally, it was called the 836 extension.
That's what arose by any other name.
Exactly, it's a parkway. Yeah, it's not a highway now. So anyway, you see it on the left, and you'll see it's going through blue areas, which are the wetlands that we've been talking about.
That's
and then,
Sept plan. That's
comprehensive. Exactly, it's part of the Everglades restoration. And then the green, as it goes further, is all agricultural land. So you're not only going through wetlands, you're going through agricultural lands, and you're going to the west. So that's the crazy thing about this too.
We'll be in Naples pretty soon.
Yeah, but here's the thing: some people are going a mile west to go downtown. Right. And one question, Michael Miller, thank you, had a great question in terms of how do people get downtown during rush hour. Well, the plan had different options the county decided to pick an option that was outside of the UDB. There were other options that were inside the UDB that would have gone
Okay,
down.
you're gonna have to
Oh,
you're gonna have
sorry,
to dumb
sorry.
this down for people.
Sorry,
who-
sorry.
That's okay.
Urban development boundary.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. So it had different plans. The urban development boundary was on that map. There's a 2020 boundary, and then there's a 2030. So that what they're trying to do is they were expanding outside of the 2020 boundary, but still inside the 2030. So they're saying, oh, well, in a couple of years, it'll be okay.
Yeah. I actually remember the boundary, sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
being on Krome Avenue.
But
The boundary was and they
Right.
keep moving the boundary farther and farther and farther to the west,
right.
which is encroaching on
Right.
Agricultural land.
Yeah.
Well, the
Right.
point was, in terms of the highway, kind of to Tony's point, they're saying, well, we're gonna have this great big highway. It's gonna have bus rapid transit, which was essentially, and if you look at the, and we did see it. I was on the planning advisory board for several years, and we saw the packet and we saw the thing, and the bus rapid transit is actually on the inside breakdown lane. So you've been on the highway, like they built on 836. Sometimes you see, fenders, bumpers of cars, trash on that inside breakdown lane. That's where they're going to have the bus rapid transit through there. And also being so far out, people actually had to drive out. So they drive out, but who's going to get on a bus and everything? The other two options that they had would have been closer to the neighborhood. So maybe somebody could have walked there, could have biked there, could have taken some sort of other transportation and gotten to the bus and taken a real bus or light rail, whatever they did, whatever they decide to do, instead of it being so far out that people can't use it. What they want to do is actually build these big stations far out so people can kind of go there and then park their car, or if they need to, and take the bus and then go downtown. It's the same
Which
thing.
is a fantasy. This idea, the park and ride suburban myth of transportation planning, that you buy a whole bunch of land in a exurban location, expect people to spend 10 minutes to drive there and then spend the next hour and a half to take a bus downtown and do the same thing in reverse. It's no wonder that we can't trust transit agencies to be good stewards of public land, because they've amassed a large portfolio, rather than run regular service in neighborhoods, in urban centers where there is a land use to support it.
Well, the problem with that is you're still not taking. You still have buses, okay? So it's going to take a lot of cars off the road, but you still have buses instead of putting in a real mass transit.
Right.
Instead of putting a metro rail line down Kendall Drive, which would be a nightmare, I'm sure, or putting, they just need to get, in my opinion, somehow get these cars off the road.
You're never going to get the cars off.
You're never going to get all the cars off the road.
It's a fantasy. So what we talk about is not about taking people out of their cars. It's about accepting new trips in other modes. As people come to this region, as they're going to continue to come, we can't expect or plan for those people to be driving. So we need to provide for them these other uses. I don't expect somebody who lives in Kendall, who's been driving for the past 30 years, to suddenly say, I'm going to start taking the bus everywhere. That's a fantasy. That is also not going to happen. Right. So those people, I think people who live in Kendall made a choice to live in suburbia. One of the things, the trade-offs, you don't get to live in a place that's very transit served or very dense. You live in a nice, a house with a big yard, but you also have to sit in traffic to get to where you want to go. And that's the trade-off. It's not fair for us to have to subsidize highways clear across town because you made an economic decision to choose a house that was cheaper than living in the urban core. And that's fine. But don't make us subsidize your highways, just like you say we want our transit subsidized.
Okay, but I'll give you the flip side of that, right? I live in Palmetto Bay, and we didn't really have any traffic, literally, until all the development down at Homestead.
I'm not surprised.
And Palmetto Bay, say 10 years ago, there was just it was night and day compared to where it is now. So I had no control over where I bought. I had no control over the development that was down south. Some of these people that live in Kendall, I'm sure they sat there, if they've been there for a while, they had no earthly clue 15 years ago that there was going to be so much development west of where they lived to completely destroy their. So what do you say to somebody who's sitting in a car? What do you say to somebody who's sitting in a car for an hour and a half?
Find another place to live. If that's your priority, if you really care about spending less time in your car and living a more urban lifestyle, then find a place to live that is close to transit, that has the amenities that you want. It's not a surprise. This didn't just happen overnight, right? This has been something that, as people come and go from neighborhoods, that's a matter of, it's something you take into account when you choose where you work and when you choose where you live.
Yeah. Or you know, some people may not like this, but look for a job that's closer to where you live. I mean,
That's part of what I'm saying.
you know,
yeah,
yeah.
like
Well, they don't have a lot of. I mean, if you go to other cities, you have a lot of pods, right?
Right.
So there's not a lot of. I mean, besides you got South Miami that could be considered a pod, right? Because they have office buildings there.
right,
Sure.
You have
right.
Coral Gables.
You see
You
it
have
along
downtown.
US 1.
Yeah,
right.
You got Coral Gables. You got Aventura. That's a pod, but you don't have a lot of pods out there where you have that live, work, play.
Okay. So
Okay.
here's the thing. You need to turn those, you need to start. There was a comment made at the beginning that nothing's been done with transit. And I think that's true from the infrastructure perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if you look at the CDMP and the work that the planners have been doing to set up a policy framework for all of this to work, actually, there's something there in the diagrams that Robert was just
Mhm.
showing. There is a plan for densifying at the right locations. That's also a policy decision that needs to be made by elected officials with political support. If you take the intersection of 127 and Kendall Drive, that's a downtown urban center, right? That should be more dense than what it is right now, which is a defunct Kmart mall and where Publix is. That was my I'll tell you, my home for the first part of my life was on 130 something, where across the street there was nothing. So I feel like in my life, as you know, I'm 41 now, I've seen the progress go from or new development. Having lived in a suburban development where there was nothing across the street and seen that march of progress, and wonder if this is not just another in a series of decisions that's going to continue that.
Oh, I won't tell anybody about the crawler.
Thank you.
If you continue to make that infrastructure, you're just pushing that development out, and you're not following the CDMP, which is our planning document.
Well, here's the thing. After serving on the planning advisory board for 5 years, we don't follow the CDMP half the time because people come in, developers come in that are connected and speak to commissioners and everything, and instead of getting an agricultural land that was supposed to be, because this is part of the plan, all the agricultural land, I don't know if you know this, all the agricultural land inside of the urban development boundary, except for horse country, is slated to be redeveloped. In the long-term CDMP, the Comprehensive Development Master Plan, it's going to be developed into some sort of living. And developers come in and say, okay, well, we have, let's say 9 units per acre. When I want 27, can you give me 27 units per acre? And then, they maybe, come down to 20 or whatever they decide. But that CDMP, and that's a concern of mine, that CDMP gets changed all the time. That's not a static document. That gets changed.
But that's okay that it's not a static document. You just need elected officials to follow it, not like what they did a couple of weeks ago, where even staff said this is not ready for submittal to the state. And Homestead Air Force Base didn't approve it. The Homestead expansion. So when you're making poor land use decisions willy-nilly like that, and then people move in and they expect to not have to sit in traffic for an hour and a half, like who was the knucklehead who approved that development where there was no infrastructure for it? And why are we going to, I'm sure there's going to be some other parkway that pops up somewhere down the road to service all the people who now live in South Dade.
You said your development company, right? Yeah. So I'll tell you a funny one. So they always talk about the highest and best use, and what obviously you're going to redevelop something. And I asked the developer one time, is like his lobbyist attorney, is so they want to really expand this project and just make it really huge. It was down south somewhere, I can't remember where. I said. He says, oh, well, right now we could develop 120 units. I mean, they were asking for like 250. We could develop 120 units right now, and we don't have to come for anything. It's agriculture now, but we could go 120 units. I said, okay, why don't you do that? He goes, well, because, then we couldn't make this project so nice and put these amenities and all this stuff. It's like, no, the reason they're not developing for 120 units is because either they don't think they're going to break even, or they think they're not going to make a lot of money.
They're trying to be greedy.
They're trying to be greedy, make more money.
Right.
That's why they keep
telling. It's all. Let me tell you, it's all based on land value anyway. I mean, basically, you work your numbers based on land value. But I have a story for you too. I mean, Village Palmetto Bay, traffic's bad. They were going through rezoning. The idea was to make it a PUD, right? And do some office, some retail or entertainment, and apartments. When they redid their zoning, they made it all apartments. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. That these people have no clue, okay, about traffic patterns or traffic or what residents want or what residents need, when they sit there and they take an area and they zone it 100% for apartments or condos, okay, instead of having a place where they could have had some office buildings where people could live in the area and just go to work.
Or use the first floor. You do mixed use and do apartments above and do small little businesses that people can use instead of getting in their car
and give them incentives, right?
Yeah. Well,
so
I mean,
give them incentives to do the pods. I said PUD, but to do the pods, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and to not oversupply parking, I find that is one of the biggest hindrances to us becoming a more walkable transit served city, is that all of these buildings, that even new buildings,
1 parking space per apartment.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's not.
How do you expect people to shift their patterns if you give them everything they need to just drive? That doesn't happen in other cities. You don't go to New York City or a major metropolitan area where they're requiring parking. Parking is provided by the market. There's some parking for guests, but you don't go 1-to-1. I mean, there need to be parking maximums.
Yeah, but you can't do that with it. I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with you, but you can't do that without valid mass transit.
We have valid mass transit. We have mass transit on US 1. Any of the developments that have popped up on US 1, all of those, any parking that's included in those buildings is a disinvestment in the rest of the system. Why would you undercut your system? There's thousands of people that are willing to occupy those buildings that are not going to want a car. That's the whole purpose.
I would argue that
it just adds
any
traffic.
mass transit south of Dadeland right now. Now they're putting in, rapid mass transit
with the busway.
Yeah, but you got to go from, so you live in Homestead, and I've talked to somebody. You live in Homestead because that's what you could afford, right? You take a bus, you get on a Metro Rail, then you go to People Mover, then you get out. It's 2 hours to get where somebody's making $20 an hour. Right. So they're spending 4 hours in to get 15, 18 miles. Okay. That's not quality of life.
Right.
And you can't force it upon somebody when they're spending 4 hours, they're making $45,000, $50,000 a year, where they have to do A, B, C, D. You have to have something that is in line with what Washington, D.C., because I've been to Washington, D.C., I thought the mass transit was pretty good there.
Yeah, it's great.
And New York, I always thought mass transit was great in New York, but that's, goes back years and years and years. Not that I want to sit on the subway, but I mean, they don't have anything like that here, and they've had that opportunity.
I know it's that when you've been here so long, like we all have, you don't see it, but I go all over and I see it all the time. The amount of development we have is phenomenal in comparison to places like we should all be grateful that we have this, because our economy is very healthy because of the development that happens. The question is, if we're oversupplying parking, people are not going to use transit, and you place these buildings at 37th Avenue, all along our existing Metro Rail. Those developments should not have the parking that they have.
Well, they're not slated for it. And let me tell you something, a developer's biggest dream in the world is to only give 1 parking space per apartment. You won't get any kickback from a developer when you say, don't worry about it, underpark your building. You know why? Because you can sit there and build more apartments or
what
some other.
What is it, like $25,000 a space now? I don't know.
It was 27 last time I checked.
You would think that, but when we were talking to the developers of Ludlam Trail Apartments, tried to get them to come down in their parking requirements, and it was like we were blowing their minds. You're on a trail. You made an investment in this infrastructure. Use it.
Yeah. The parking issue. I'm glad Tony said the parking issue, because I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to. We agree on a lot, but we also disagree spiritedly.
Robert likes his parking close.
And I don't have any problem if you gave me some real mass transit. This city is a joke when it comes to mass transit.
Well, this is what I was going to say. As much as I rag on the county, particularly in terms of what has been done for transit or not been done, is you look at New York, that system's over 100 years old. You look at, I don't know how DC.
It was built before the expansion of New York. They had that system in place before they did the development.
So New York, Chicago, DC. I mean, these systems are, 100 years old, 80 years old, I think maybe DC, or maybe longer. I mean, we've had it since 1984. That's it. So as much as I can say,
that's a long time. That's a long time.
Yeah, I understand, but
they called that when the Metro Rail first went up, and it didn't go to the taxi lobby was really strong back then.
Right,
You're probably I don't know, you may be a little young for this, but I remember as a kid, the taxi lobby was really strong, and they had to sign an agreement with the taxi lobby that they would not bring the Metro Rail into the airport.
Right.
That was the big
Wow.
issue of the day.
That's crazy.
Right? So
Right.
they called it, and Gene Flynn just went up there. They called it the white elephant because nobody would get on it because it didn't go anywhere. Right? That was during the Reagan days.
Mhm.
Right? We got the funding, and everybody was like, I can't believe, Reagan gave you guys so much money, blah, 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 to build this thing that doesn't go anywhere, because it really didn't go anywhere.
Right.
Now, at least
Right.
they've extended it, and it's
A little
gone,
bit. But yeah, all those things. If you go, there's that thing, which we've talked about. There's, if you go down to the government center, there's that, what they call the ghost platform. Did you see that? If you look down, if you look to the west, there's a platform. There's the base of a platform of a line that was going to go west and never did.
The east-west line.
The east-west
Really?
line. But there's
Yeah.
a platform
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. You can
Interesting.
still see it.
Let's get to a couple questions.
Sure.
So, Lisa, sorry, priority for who? I guess we
missed that.
missed that. I'm sorry. Gene Flynn, very little has been done. Palmetto Bay once had an award-winning plan for realistic development. Now it's nothing more than more apartments, and avoids local responsibility for developing based upon the current needs, not the 1950s. That was just a comment, not a question, I would assume. Jill, if you live in Cutler Bay and work in Doral, it is a bus to the Metro Rail, to the bus, It takes 2 hours each way, and then you have to walk to the bus. Okay, we're talking about a city, by the way, that it constantly rains. I mean, not a lot of cities have the amount of rain that we do. So I understand.
I think you go to any tropical place, and I hear this argument all the time. In New York, you have snow. You've got rain, snow, heat.
I rather walk through the snow than rain.
Yeah, but the rain's in the afternoon anyway.
There is weather everywhere in the world, and there's terrible weather in places that have great transit. So that is not.
Okay,
an
but
excuse.
why should she have to take?
She shouldn't.
Two
That's
buses
inhumane.
and one
I would
Metro
never.
Rail.
No.
Okay.
See,
to
but
get
you're,
to work.
but that's not a weather thing, right? What we're talking about there is a complete lack of infrastructure. And we have streets, we have 6-lane, 8-lane arterials. You're telling me that this is a political thing again. It has to do with political will and people seeing ahead and seeing that this is in their best interest. Taking one whole lane of Kendall Drive and making that an express transit lane that has been studied by FDOT.
Oh, that would be great.
Why haven't they done that?
But
why? We don't have to spend $1 billion on a train.
They've been studying that.
And they always come to the
won't
conclusion.
tell you how I know they're studying that, but they've been studying that forever, and they've actually contacted some of the landowners up and down
to try to widen the right of way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is not, you don't need more right of way. You just need to use the right of way
right.
that's there. It's going to cause more traffic for the people that are there, but it's a greater good. Like is it the 2,500 people an hour we can move by bus, or is it the 700 people an hour that are going to be there stuck in traffic?
Yeah. But it reminds me, actually, that you say that because I don't know if you remember, but well, you don't remember. I don't think you're that old. We're about the same age.
I'm older than you, believe it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Coral Way used to have a rail line down the middle in Miami, and they got rid of that and planted the trees and stuff. In the Gables, there was tons of rail lines all over for streetcars. And the cars came, and the car lobby came out, and everybody had to have a car, and everybody, pushed the streetcars away. But we were actually on a good route for mass transit here in Miami-Dade County a long time ago, and it just kind of evaporated. Now we just have to rebuild again. Oh, well, somebody mentioned something, but I at one point I do want to mention, because there's also other options. I mean, and I think I sent you an article on that. There's a CSX line. I don't know. There's CSX.
I saw that.
It's a mindset, not weather. That's right. That's right, John Henry. I think you're absolutely right.
Exactly.
And Gene, I agree with you 100%. This is kind of what my point is. The development that you've got within the UDB at transit stops has to be something that's urban and
Well, it's funny. He says Chicago. Years ago, it's probably 15 years ago, I had a meeting with the transportation guy in Chicago, and I said, how come you guys have so many people on bikes using mass transit, this thing, and how do you do that, and people aren't bringing their cars in? He goes, you know why? Because it's so expensive to park in downtown Chicago. So I mean, I bring that up because that's another
that's it,
something else in the tool belt.
No, but you can't but you can't.
It's all transportation policy, urban walkable buildings
I know,
without
but to sit
parking.
there and charge people more money to park, where if you look at the dichotomy between
No, David, if you want people to drive less,
Yeah.
you need to put policies in place that make them drive
yeah,
less.
but you can't. You're
That's it.
penalizing people that make that are scraping to survive down
Well,
here.
that's
no,
okay.
no, that's a misnomer, because the people who are scraping to get by are taking transit. They're the ones on the
Right.
2-hour bus drive who are trying to make
Yeah.
a better commute.
Yeah.
The people who are driving in can afford the $15. I don't want to assume that
Yeah.
everybody can afford
Yeah.
that, but then let's make the humane transit so that it's got to be, both, and not just like penalties for parking, but lower parking or penalties for parking or more expensive parking with the transit investment.
Well, you used to have that. What you used to have expensive parking in city of Miami. Used to have a penalty for parking in city of Miami or something. I remember something like that. I just don't remember what there was an extra tax or something to park your car there.
Mm.
Oh yeah.
I remember paying for parking when I was employed at an office building. They didn't give parking for free, yet they used to charge you on a monthly basis. I remember that. But I mean, you still need to be able to take 1 or 2 vehicles to get to work, public transportation, and not 4 and 5.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
and I think-
Even
True.
2, I think, is like,
And I think-
it's inhumane. There should be more continuous lines
Yeah,
that have
correct.
routes.
Right.
And which is one of the reasons why the Bailing project has been, I think, such a disappointment so far, for years. And it's been talked about as a monorail and a couple of other modes, when it's such a quick extension of the metro rail.
Mhm.
That one extension could go to the airport. It could go all the way to South
Right.
Dade. A lot of people work in Miami Beach and vice versa, from
Yeah.
Miami Beach to downtown. That you would have ridership on that instantly. I don't know why
But we don't
keep
have the
on-
money. But we're going to spend $1 billion on
Right,
this
right,
parkway.
right.
But we do have the money.
Yeah,
Th-
right.
I'm-
right.
But
I
I
know-
know you're being. I know.
Who do we have the
facetious,
money
Right.
for?
But we do
and
have
what
the
kind of
money,
projects?
and the money's not. The problem is the money's not going to where the money should be going.
Right.
Can we agree?
Sure.
Can we all agree
Right.
on that?
Right.
Sure.
The fact of the matter is, transportation is one of the biggest issues in Dade County. Along with public safety and parks and stuff like that. And if you ask somebody, list your 5 biggest issues
Right.
in Dade County, I bet you transportation would be in the top
Of course.
3.
Right.
Okay,
Typically,
because
yeah.
it's a quality of life situation.
Yeah.
Right. So, and what are we doing though? I mean, we're talking about listen, number one is they should never, ever, ever change the urban boundary.
Do that. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Ever again. They've done it a couple times now, right?
Yes.
Can you count how many times they've done it? Because I read about it, but I don't.
Well, because they
Uh,
change it. They change it in increments. Remember,
Yeah.
it's not just the whole line changes. It's just like
But
this
it's been
little
a little
section
while.
pops
It's
out.
been a little
This
while.
little
yeah.
section. There was one change to the urban boundary in the last 2 or 3 years that was just like it was a minor project that
Mhm.
went out of the project. So that's what they do it. It's like death by 1,000 cuts
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
that's
they
how they've
sneak
been
it
doing
by.
it.
It's called lack of transparency. They think if they do it a little bit at a time, it's not going to end up on the front of the Miami Herald.
Right.
Right, because they
Right.
also justify because the county's broken down as what's called municipal statistical areas, MSAs,
Yeah.
and they say, well, in this MSA, the inventory for industrial is going to run out in 2030. So this is why we really need to change this agricultural into industrial it's going to run out next year because we really need to increase it because we're going to run out of industrial folks, and so they scare you into saying that. And I mean, personally, I don't think it's true, but
So Grant Miller came to me today, and he goes, "Well, what do you think of them changing, the urban boundary line?" And I go, "Not a chance. They just cannot keep encroaching on the Everglades."
Right.
I said, "Eventually, there's going to be serious issues. Number one, the hurricanes. Okay, because the Everglades, I mean, during maintain water and wildlife and everything."
Right.
And I go, "You can't do it." He goes, "Well, how about all the people that are moving into South Dade, to Dade County?" And I'm like, "We're going to have to go back. We're going to have to go, and we're going to have to find areas where there's been construction or some sort of development, and we're going to have to redevelop it."
That's it. That's all it is.
But-
That's
okay,
what
and if
happens
you-
in every other city.
and if you
it's
walk-
not like
and if
revolutionary.
if you drive up and down, not that there's transportation, there is transportation, but you drive up and down from say Pinecrest to Homestead, there are these big, huge buildings that are just, I've never seen anybody there. They're vacant. They're old canning facilities or old,
warehouse
warehouses and
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that. They can tear down and they can build something because if anything, those are really damn close to what's supposed to be the new bus.
Right.
bus
Exactly.
route, right.
That's exactly right.
Why
That's
would you
exactly
go
right.
to the Everglades
Right.
when you're sitting there that close to a metro rail line or whatever is going to go
Right,
on there, the
right.
BTR, okay, and you can just tear it down and put some housing there.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't own that land. I can get that land over there for $3 million, and this one maybe is too expensive for me. And so that the
They're going to have to
developers,
subsidize.
they tell you all the
government's gonna
time.
have to subsidize it.
I guess I'm not sure what I'm not totally sure what the answer is there. But even without knocking down buildings, there's tons of undeveloped, vacant land in this county. There was just a report a couple years ago of the tons of vacant land that could be turned into affordable housing, other things.
And that was part of the report that staff gave for that recent homestead application that they transmitted to the state. And one of the results of that, I don't know if you noticed this, I think it was Commissioner Martinez had put on one of the committees an item that staff not look at land that was not single family home in its assessment of whether there was developable land, as if to suggest that single family home land designated for single family homes was the actual currency that we needed to trade in as the most important type, most valuable, because that's where people want to live, not like urban land.
Yeah,
seems to me
I would say
blows my mind.
I would disagree with that.
Of course,
knowing millennials, okay,
right. I mean,
and seeing what's gone on in downtown with the development of 30-story condos and 30-story apartments.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
Suburbia is a Ponzi scheme that doesn't ever pay for what it sells, and we end up paying for all that infrastructure. If the densities are much lower out west, we can all agree on that, right? So you still have to service it with the fire department, the police department, water and sewer. All the streets are much wider. There's a cost to that. It's way more expensive to develop suburbia from a public standpoint than redeveloping existing.
Yeah, but then you have people say, you're pitting the haves versus the have-nots, right? So if you can afford a single family house because you have more money, good for you. But the rest of us have to live in apartments, and we don't want to live in apartments. Or
those houses out west are also $400,000 for a 3,000 square foot house or something humongous. So the price per square foot is very low, but you're getting a humongous house. So they're making a choice. They want to have the 2 or 3 extra bedrooms versus the people that live here, bringing it back to here. Why should we subsidize? Because they want to live in a big house on the edge of town. Great. Good for you. You made that choice. That was not new information. This is not new information. For the most part, people have been hearing about this project for a long time.
So tell me, who on the Miami-Dade Commission is supportive of the extension, the Parkway extension, and who are not supportive?
Robert, you would know.
I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly
the
who.
lineup.
Yeah, the lineup. I don't know. I'm assuming that the people out west, the commissioners out west, all support it, because or else it's not going to go forward. If you look at the item, it's certain commissions, and I had the item that went before the BCC, and it says it goes through. I'll tell you right now because it says it right in the front.
By the way, just building this road, all this road is going to do, well, it's going to, number one, alleviate traffic, but it's also going to cause more development west of this road. Yeah, you're just going to, all this is going to sit there and say, give people a reason to sit there and move that urban boundary line.
And the way highway construction and car traffic works is as soon as you build extra capacity, it gets filled.
Yeah.
Right. Cars are humongous. So there's no lack of space. We could add another lane to the Palmetto and it'd still have its peak moment. So it's not going to alleviate traffic. It's not going to alleviate anything.
So I read an article that you sent me. Thanks. You sent me a whole bunch of material to read that said it's only going to increase traffic 10 minutes.
According to the hearings, it would be on a 2-hour round trip from West Kendall. It would reduce traffic by 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Okay, so it was 6 minutes.
6 minutes. 3 minutes one way, 3 minutes back.
Does it help life safety issues? I'm asking you this for a reason, because we have a bridge that's going to be built in Palmetto Bay that half the people south of 168th Street wanted, half the people north of 168th don't want it because it's going to bring more traffic into residential areas. Right. And I was always against the bridge. I was for 5 bridges. I'm going, if you're going to build one, just build 5. Okay, because it's like water. You got a bunch of different nozzles and spouts and everything. You're reducing you're reducing what's going to happen to those neighborhoods with traffic with 1 to 5. But they said that it will help life safety issues, that somebody's life could be saved.
A response time.
But
that's more of an urban arterial. This is out in.
This is out. So will this have any?
No.
effect on
Not in terms. First of all, nobody lives out there. That's part
Yeah.
of it. You're going over wetlands and
Yeah.
agriculture. But yeah, the reason for that is that somebody, an emergency vehicle, can go straight to that house that's on the other
Yeah.
side instead of going way around the canal.
like, you know, on
Yeah.
the bay, yeah.
Yeah.
So many different. You have a canal that goes all over the place, and we don't have enough, bridges over the canals.
Right.
So what would you say if they, instead of a highway or a parkway, they put some sort of mass transit route and a metro rail line that connected to the metro rail line at Dayland or someplace else?
On that same alignment,
Yeah.
I think you'd be hard pressed
No.
to sell that to me as a transit advocate, because if it's not running within surrounded by urbanism, then it's not going to survive.
Right.
It needs to be in the middle of the city. It needs to be adjacent to the sidewalk so that people can just walk right up to the station. And
Speaking of,
get in
Tommy, could we
transit.
see the third picture, the one that was a JPEG?
If you're on 137,
No, the second. Sorry,
maybe
second.
that's what you're trying to get.
So
at.
here are the options. So
Yeah.
so this is some of the options that they looked at. So we've got, oh, that just shows 157, I think. Oh yeah, it's got all the different corridors, right?
By the way, I can tell. We always talk about Kendall Drive because I always think Kendall Drive so bad, but Sunset is just as bad, and so is Miller.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I've driven on Sunset sometimes because of the amount of schools that are on Sunset, and it's actually worse than Kendall Drive.
Totally.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about Miller, because I live close to Miller right here at 67th, where
Nice.
it goes from 4 lanes to 2 lanes.
Mhm.
Like Miller is 2 lanes for a part of it anyway. So it goes from all this traffic all of a sudden, just magically at 67th, another 2-lane road, the traffic kind of dissipates. That tells you a lot about, if you add lanes, all you're doing is adding traffic, because there's no capacity after a certain point. The network just assumes all that traffic.
By the way, I don't think it's as much about traffic as it is travel time, right? So
I don't think people are not that astute to be thinking about travel times. They're thinking, I'm stuck in traffic.
Yeah,
and it's
because
like
of the travel times.
a time dilation thing.
Yeah.
No, it's a perception of time.
Yeah.
It's not a real time. Because when you look at the actual numbers, when we talk about delays of things, always people speak in hyperbole, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's making traffic
I see.
terrible.
But they're talking about travel. But they're talking about.
But it's
I think
like
they're talking about. Listen, I don't
a
care.
minor
I don't care
delay.
if I'm in traffic for as long as I'm going 45 miles an hour. That doesn't bother me.
Right.
But the second I
Right.
start going, I go to work along Old Cutler Road, because I go to
and you're stuck in traffic.
and I'm stuck in traffic. I'm going 10 miles an hour.
Right.
Okay, which is actually happens. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much traffic here.
Well, in
Right,
this scenario,
but you're
though,
still moving. And
yeah,
But I'm
in this scenario, you're going to save 3 minutes. You're going to be constantly
Yeah.
moving, but you're going to get there 3 minutes earlier. So it's just like, okay, we spent $1 billion. You got there 3 minutes early, but you were constantly moving instead of stop and
Yeah.
go.
Is there a way to do what they want to do? And can we put that map back up? Thanks. Is there a way to do what they want to do without putting it in
Well,
the Everglades?
Well, look at 157. I think 157th and 167th were corridors that were discussed and looked at. Imagine, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that
no,
they should do this.
137.
37.
There was this one has.
Yes, I'm sorry, I can't read
This
that.
is even further west.
So, but
we're talking about
regardless,
east of the red line.
yeah, right. Regardless of the actual corridor that they could pick, they could take a right of way like that, and they could do light rail down the middle. They could do BRT, which I'm not a fan of, and then people from the neighborhoods could potentially go to that stop, or drive a couple, or walk a couple blocks in some cases if they have the density at some of those big stops where they're supposed to have stops on Kendall and stuff. You have more density, so people could technically don't have to.
I mean, not to
get
go
in their car.
down the rabbit hole here, but this would never compete for federal funding, which is what you would need to make a project.
Oh,
Like
because
this
you have to have
happen.
the population.
Because you need to have the population
Sure.
density around to
Yeah.
support the service, which is why they're having trouble with 27th Avenue, the next line, the next project in line for funding, for federal funding.
Well, not to mention obviously the environmental issues of going through wetlands and
right.
and
Well,
that-
I was disappointed in DeSantis because the only redeeming quality I thought DeSantis had, okay, which is far and few between, is I thought he was a huge advocate for the Everglades.
Yeah, right.
I mean, one of the first things he did was try to protect the Everglades, blah blah blah.
Right,
and,
right.
You know,
right.
Big
And he
Sugar and
initially
all
was
this stuff.
lukewarm about this project, I feel.
and Big Sugar and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
I really thought, and to me, the Everglades are as important as the
Sure.
Bay, or
Absolutely.
some
But yeah, but the whole county is, and the mayor, the previous mayor was pushing for this, and as much as I kind of agree with you on some of those things about him, he's basically approving something that we've asked for. So the county's asked for it.
Mhm.
And granted, a lot of us don't agree with it, but he is approving something. And hopefully, and that would just happen yesterday where the cabinet outside of Nikki
Yeah,
Fried voted for it.
Right.
But ultimately it still has to get permits. It has to get South Florida Water Management District permits. I believe DEP,
If that's SERP land,
EPA,
that's also the
right,
Army
so
Corps.
EPA, so
Yeah.
so it's got an uphill climb, but apparently some people in the county are still pushing for it.
Yeah, but the problem is if you're pushing for this, you're not going to be looking at other options.
No.
Right? You're taking your
Well, here's the thing that they did that was really smart in LA and in other places is that they do a greater bond, a greater transportation tax, and then they're upfront with the actual numbers and with the projects, and they do layer some highway projects in there. And it's like the poison pill. Do the transit advocates feel that passionately that they want that $4 billion for their lines if they're willing to support something like this?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, it's not just it's a principle thing, right? We spend so much on highways and we don't spend anything on expanding transit. To spend more on this just feels like spiteful.
Well, let me just, I mentioned it before. I want to make sure that I make the statement on it. CSX lines. Let's get back to that. So there's these CSX lines that go down to Homestead, okay, in West Miami-Dade. CSX actually put into the federal government 2 years ago an abandonment application, basically. And I think I might have sent that to you too. And in their abandonment application, they said that that line hadn't been used for freight traffic in 2 years. So we've got this long line, I think it's 12 miles, running right through our county that we can't touch. And the last time, and I'll give credit to former commissioner who ran for mayor, Steve Bovo, on this. He was really pushing for the county to purchase a CSX line. And at the time, this is 2018, they were quoting numbers like 245 million. And what CSX wanted is the state to buy it, and then that they would negotiate in how many times they would use it. I would say, let's push that again. Let's go back to that. Yeah. And then also let's look at eminent domain. Can we go in there and maybe, and people don't like this, but can we go in there and say, look, this is a main corridor, an artery that's just dormant in our county. And we have a huge transportation issue. Can we get that? And then we say, look, we want to take it over and take them to court. Yeah, we'll let you use it at sometimes, but we need it for transportation.
Where is that? Because there used to be a CX line that ran parallel to the bus transit line.
Yes,
on US 1. I think,
no, but this is another one.
You're talking about one that's farther west.
This is the extension. Southwest. This is kind of like the extension, the Turnpike extension along there, and then it goes way down south.
Okay,
it's not obviously the same corridor as these things, but these aren't one solution. I mean,
no,
245 over one.
There's not going to be, that's what people don't understand. There's not going to be one solution. I mean, look at. I mean, I'll use New York. I mean, they have taxis, they have subway, they have trains, they have whatever. I think I don't know if Ed So was watching, but we went through the other day. We are having a conversation about the different transit avenues that they had in New York and some of the major cities. I don't think we have the amount that we, so if the line's there, I would assume it's pretty easy, except for you need to build stations, right?
Yeah.
And you need to get cars, but you already have the ability to put the cars on the trains.
Right.
So, and I wonder along any of those lines, do they have vacant land or anything? Or you talking about?
I mean, the lines, I think what Ludlam Trail is usually the right of way is 100 feet, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that CSX line has moments that are more narrow, but the thing with the CSX line that is like the Ludlam Trail is that it runs behind single family homes, and you're going to have, every time this pops up, the sort of NIMBY contingent that would have their
welcome to freedom of speech.
Yeah,
right.
They're
any place you have freedom of speech, you're gonna have NIMBYs.
And it's a good thing to have people who have opinions, but it's when their opinions and their voices are so much louder and they can sway policy decisions that are matter to the whole metropolis. I think,
or
that's one of those types of projects.
Or they can say my voice only matters because I'm adjacent to
because I'm here. Yeah, I'm a neighbor. I heard
your voice doesn't matter.
Well, anybody who buys a house on a train track, or across from a train track, should know that there's a possibility of a train using the train track.
Yeah, right.
So, but it's as you were saying, it's NIMBYs. I mean, that's a pretty
But by the way, I wanted to say something that Tony said about suburbia. There's no suburbia in Miami-Dade County. The urban, then this is and I'm saying it kind of facetiously, but the urban development boundary, and I've had this issue with county staff or question, urban development boundary. They pitch sometimes to the BCC, the Board of County Commissioners. Developers will pitch a project on agricultural land that might be south of Tamiami Airport. You know,
Sure.
And they cite the section in the comprehensive development plan that this is urban infill. And I've questioned that. I said, well, what do you mean urban infill? We're in the middle of nowhere. It's like, no, everything inside of the urban development boundary is urban. Therefore, you might get
you're getting into semantics, because you know that Kendall is suburban,
but they don't,
right?
but they don't. It seems like there isn't that kind of differentiation anymore.
No, well, everything is developable. I think that's they're differentiating between developable versus agricultural or wildland. And that's the UDB's differentiation. I think we would all think of the city of Miami as urban, right? And then everything outside of that is varying degrees of suburban, with some pockets.
Let's take some of these questions. The problem is very political. MPO that serves the politicians, not the residents. Protected bike lane is a code word for making the mode too expensive to do. Let's do a shared path instead. It's cheaper and it won't work as needed. He's talking about Palmetto Bay. I swore to God I wasn't going to talk about Palmetto Bay today. Let's discuss trees. Let's not. Oh, okay. As long as it's trees in the Everglades.
Yes.
Let's discuss trees. The project will cause a greater loss of tree canopy.
Totally.
The Everglades X-Way Parkway expansion of Palmetto Bay designed 136th Street. Gene Flynn has one mindset. Okay. Just one mindset. Madeline Roman, it's travel time when I can go to Miramar in 45 minutes, 100%. But it takes 9 minutes. She's somebody I constantly email back and forth or whatever is on Facebook. She's got a absolutely horrendous trip every single day. And it's terrible. It's awful. Jill, exactly. Have a plan to leave, to go to work, leave at 6:15 in the morning because traffic on US 1 from Palmetto Bay to Palmetto Expressway takes 20 to 25 minutes. That's actually true. Okay, guys, from Michael Miller. What are some of the things we need to do so we can live south or west and not stress out? He lives out on Miller Road. Luckily, he's his own boss, so it doesn't matter when he comes to work.
Right.
And
we've talked about some of those things. We've talked about light rail on 80th, maybe using one of the corridors that goes north and south. Yeah. Maybe using CSX. There's a lot of different options for us to be looking at. We haven't talked about urban centers. The county has designated urban centers, and we're not really doing enough to do developments around those centers that are out west. And instead of just kind of creating this false, I like
area. The urban center idea. I don't like the idea if you're a mile off, mass transit route that you can build 25-story apartments. Or
a mile off is too far.
Well, whatever. It's a half a mile,
a half mile, or
whatever it is. But you know what I'm talking about. So
that's reasonable.
They're coming up with a plan that's a mile or a half a mile or anything. And I just think that's overreaching. And that's what's in front of that's what the what's going on right now in Miami-Dade.
So then make it a quarter of a mile.
Yeah, and I think that'll be
I
think that'll be negotiated down.
Yeah,
and also it's not, when you do those rapid transit zones or zones in general, it's not fair to just draw a circle around it, because people say, "Oh, look, I'm only a quarter mile from this stop," and I've seen that people do it up north, the Golden Glades Exchange. Yeah, but you're on the other side of the Golden Glades.
You're not walking anywhere in a quarter.
You have to drive 2 miles to get to that park and ride.
Yeah, right.
But yet you're using the code like, "Oh, I'm only half a mile," but no, you're really not.
Right. Take into account barriers and
you have to take into those barriers.
But you have to redevelop a lot of this
so area. Victoria Carpenter Road, stopover building, you'll not have the problem. So this is the problem, okay, with people who don't understand how the overbuilding works. They say, "Oh, you're overbuilding, you're putting a house on everybody who owns a piece of property has rights."
Right.
Okay, and you can't take the rights away from them. It's called spot zoning or Burt J. Harris, or you got to watch the trend of development. And I feel for these people, but once you give people the rights, okay, once you give people the rights to build on their piece of property, you ain't taking it away from them, or you either have to buy it from them, okay, or you're going to get sued.
Yeah, but what
you
she's
can't
saying,
down zone,
right?
And you can't tell somebody you got a piece of property, and since you haven't built in 10 years or 15 years, you're not allowed to build there. No. You have to leave it as grass. I understand the feeling, because I'd like to see that. But it's not. It's like telling you you got a pool in your backyard, okay? As of today, you can't
Right.
swim.
Right.
You can't.
Yeah, but what I think the key word there is overbuilding. Okay, you know.
Well, your definition.
I've seen
of
You're
my
exactly-
overbuilding.
wait. No, I'm not saying. I'm not talking about definition. I'm saying the CDMP, like I said, the development plan says this land can be built as a, duplex. Let's say
Yeah.
a four unit building. Developers are coming in and saying, oh, let's do 20 units. It's not the overbuilding happens
I think it's-
project by project when they're getting exceptions.
You gotta watch
density.
you gotta watch the trend of development, right? So if I have a 20-story building next to me and my piece of property only lets 4 stories, damn well I'm going to sit there and say, there's a trend of development that you have to take in consideration, and you owe me 20 stories.
Exactly.
And that's the way it works.
But it happens all the time. But we create that new trend every single day. We create that in neighborhoods. We have
you like tax dollars? You like tax dollars?
Yeah.
Why do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to tell. Okay, so you're not going to tell me that. I'm looking at. First of all, they all look for tax revenue, right?
Right.
They don't want to raise your taxes, because they raise your taxes, they're going to be voted out of office.
Right.
So where am I going to get that money from? I'm going to get that money from building a 20-story building, okay, that has a lot more value than a 4-story building, and I won't have to raise your individual taxes. And I'm telling you, that's the mindset of government.
Well, the lobbyist that works for that developer has given hundreds of thousands to their campaign.
I would tend to think that's actually what's happening.
But unless it's dark money, okay, they're not getting $100,000 from a developer.
There's more dark money than light money.
By the way, also on top of that is developers pay impact fees.
Yes.
Where are the impact fees supposed to be going? It's supposed to be going to transportation, okay,
Parks,
or schools or fire protection. I bet you if you sat there and did an audit where these impact fees are going, they're going to furniture in somebody's damn office,
right?
Okay, in downtown Miami,
right.
It's
Or it's just such a small contribution to the actual cost of whatever it is. It's a nominal amount, right?
I could tell you,
pretty big.
It sometimes can get really, I mean, you got impact fees on, you got water sewer connection fees, you got, that go to the county, you got impact fees. I mean, there's just all kinds of fees.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned water sewer connection fees, because so there's all this vacant land in all these different places, including in Little Havana, for example. But you've got water lines, okay? You've got land that you can build up to 4 or 5 stories, but you've got water lines that are 4 inches or 6 inches.
Yeah.
So the WASD is coming out and saying, oh, you have to put it to 12 inches or 8 inches, whatever. But then you can't redevelop. So all this vacant land, you'll see vacant land that will turn over 3 and 4 times and not be developed in areas where you really need redevelopment, because the water lines aren't there. And to build that kind of infrastructure, it's too expensive for the development, and it dies, and they'd rather sell it. So that, I mean,
but you would invest. You do want water pressure, right?
Yeah, right.
But I would invest.
Right.
I mean, I think the county should invest in those water lines and sewer lines in those areas where we want redevelopment, where we want affordable housing, so those projects can come to fruition.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah, because you want to do infill. I mean, my idea is to do infill instead of expanding.
Of course.
If the county wants to go into the Everglades, why don't they just let us build in the bay? Why don't we just start building houses in the bay? It's still environmentally,
We used to.
Well, you're talking about
Star Island.
Oh, Star Island.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not what
I think our island making days are over.
I mean, that's Miami Beach was built
a big real estate project.
Right. So I mean, it's not like Miami Beach wasn't there 100 years ago.
No, not at all.
I mean, that's why it's half underwater right now. They got to build it up. But the fact of the matter is, don't go in the Everglades. Leave the Everglades alone.
Good point.
Okay? And don't go in the ocean. Leave the ocean alone. Because the same people who want to build and change the urban boundary lines in the Everglades sure as hell want to start developing in the ocean.
If they let them, sure.
I don't know. They won't let them. Anyway, this was great. The hour, by the way, flew by today. I'd like to have you guys, once you find out more information on this, you guys are invited back anytime you want. I'd love to discuss this more. Hopefully somebody will kill it along the way.
We're going to have Mayor Levine Cava next time too.
Oh yeah. I'd love to hear her perspective on this, because hopefully she's as big of an environmentalist as we are. Anyway, thanks for everybody. Next week we're going to be talking all things Palmetto Bay again. I can't get away from Palmetto Bay. Okay, but everybody stay healthy and stay safe, and we'll see you next Thursday. Peace out.